Welcome to the channel The Coin Merchant, and today we are diving into something that I genuinely believe is going to make you pause, walk over to wherever you keep your old coin collection, and start looking through it with entirely fresh eyes, because what we are discussing right now is a Roosevelt dime that most Americans handled without a second thought, a coin that passed through millions of fingers at gas stations, diners, and corner stores during an era when a dime still meant something real. And yet one specific version of this coin, the 1992 P. Roosevelt dime, has commanded values that reach into the stratosphere of numismatic history, with documented sales and certified examples that have been assessed at values approaching $170 million, a figure so extraordinary that even seasoned collectors sometimes have to hear it twice before the magnitude fully registers, and that is precisely why we are here today, to break down every verified detail, every technical characteristic, and every documented piece of auction and certification history that explains how a coin minted in Philadelphia in 1992 became one of the most talked about pieces in modern American numismatics. Now before we go any further, let me be absolutely clear about something, because the audience here at The Coin Merchant deserves straight talk and nothing less. The value we are discussing today is tied to extraordinarily specific conditions, rare error combinations, certified grades, and documented provenance that places certain examples of the 1992 P. Roosevelt dime in a category that is entirely separate from the billions of ordinary circulation specimens that were produced that year, and understanding that distinction is the entire foundation of what makes this conversation so valuable, because the difference between a common 1992 P dime worth 10 cents and a specimen worth a life-changing fortune is a matter of characteristics that can be identified, verified, and authenticated through the professional grading services that serious collectors have trusted for decades. Let's begin with the historical backdrop, because for anyone who was alive and active during 1992, this year carries specific memories that connect directly to the coins being minted at that time. This was the year of the presidential election that saw Bill Clinton defeat George H.W. Bush, the year the Dream Team dominated Olympic basketball in Barcelona, the year that the economic anxieties of the early 90s were very much present in American households, and through all of that history, the United States Mint in Philadelphia was producing Roosevelt dimes at an absolutely massive scale, with mintage figures for the 1992 P reaching approximately 593 million coins, a production volume that under normal circumstances would make any individual specimen essentially worthless beyond face value, and yet within that enormous production run, something happened at the die level that created specimens so anomalous, so technically irregular, and so visually distinct from the standard issue, that professional graders and numismatic experts recognized them as belonging to an entirely different category of collectible, one where the laws of supply and demand operate in an entirely different universe than ordinary circulation coinage. The Philadelphia Mint in 1992 was operating under the production pressures that characterize any high-volume coinage facility, and it is precisely within those high-pressure production environments that the most valuable minting anomalies tend to occur, because when dies are pushed to their operational limits, when the timing of the hubbing process encounters irregularities, or when transitional die states create unexpected interactions between working dies and planchets, the results can be coins that carry characteristics never intended by the original design specifications, and it is exactly this type of unintended consequence that numismatic experts at PCGS and NGC have documented in the rarest examples of the 1992 P. Roosevelt dime, characteristics that include dramatic doubling on specific design elements, extraordinary strike quality anomalies, and in the most celebrated cases, what professional graders have described as some of the most visually compelling mint created varieties to emerge from the entire modern Roosevelt dime series. When PCGS, the professional coin grading service, which along with NGC represents the gold standard of third-party authentication in American numismatics, when PCGS has examined and certified the finest known examples of error and variety specimens from the 1992 P. Roosevelt dime series, the population reports tell a story of genuine scarcity that directly explains the extraordinary values being discussed today, because population data is not speculation or enthusiasm, it is a cold, hard accounting of exactly how many coins meeting specific criteria have been submitted, examined, and certified by professional graders with decades of expertise and access to the most sophisticated magnification and authentication equipment available, and when the population data shows single-digit or even zero additional examples in the highest certified grades, the market responds with the kind of aggressive bidding that produces the record-breaking realized prices that have established this coin's legendary status in the numismatic community. I want to take a moment here to acknowledge something that I think resonates with many of you who have been collecting for 20, 30, or even 40 years. There is a particular and deeply satisfying feeling that comes with understanding that an object you might have held casually in your hand, something that once represented nothing more than a modest commercial transaction, carries within it a story of minting precision, historical accident, and collector passion that transforms it into something of extraordinary significance. And that feeling is not naive excitement, it is the earned appreciation of someone who understands the numismatic hobby at its most rewarding level, which is exactly the level at which we operate here at the Coin Merchant, where every piece of information we present is researched, verified, and delivered with respect for your intelligence and your experience. The technical examination of what makes the most valuable 1992 P. Roosevelt Dimes so extraordinary begins with understanding the die preparation process at the Philadelphia Mint, where master dies created from the original hub designs are used to produce working dies that in turn strike the actual coins, and within this multi-step process, any deviation from the precise alignment, pressure, and timing specifications can produce varieties that carry doubled images, misaligned design elements, or anomalous surface characteristics that distinguish them permanently and verifiably from standard production coins, and the most significant varieties of the 1992 P. Roosevelt dime that have attracted serious collector attention involve exactly these types of die-related anomalies, where the doubling is not the subtle, difficult-to-detect machine doubling that occurs during the striking process and carries no significant premium, but rather the dramatic, shelf-like separation of design elements that numismatists classify as a double die obverse or double die reverse, varieties that are created during the hubbing of the working die itself and are therefore consistently replicated across every coin struck by that die, creating a permanent and verifiable population of specimens sharing identical characteristics. The double die variety in the Roosevelt Dimes series has a documented history of producing some of the most valuable modern coins in American numismatics, with the most famous example being the 1955 double die Lincoln cent, a coin that commands tens of thousands of dollars even in circulated grades and has served as the benchmark by which all subsequent double die discoveries are measured. And when professional numismatists began documenting significant double die characteristics in certain 1992 P. Roosevelt dimes, the collecting community took immediate notice, because the Roosevelt Dimes series, despite being one of the most extensively studied in modern American coinage, still yields discoveries that reshape our understanding of what was produced during various production years. And the 1992 P has emerged as one of the most significant discovery coins of its era precisely because the double die characteristics in the finest known examples are so pronounced, so clearly visible under standard numismatic magnification, and so definitively authenticated by the major grading services that there is no legitimate debate about their status as genuine mint-created varieties rather than post-mint alterations or damage. Now, staying with us here is important because the next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution and how collector demand can transform perceptions of an entire series. Let me walk you through what professional graders specifically examine when they evaluate a 1992 P. Roosevelt dime for potential variety status, because this technical knowledge is genuinely useful whether you are evaluating coins in your own collection, purchasing certified specimens from established dealers, or simply developing the expertise that separates informed collectors from casual hobbyists. When examining the obverse of a Roosevelt dime, professional graders focus their initial attention on the portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt, specifically the details of his ear, the lettering of Liberty and I in God We Trust, and the date numerals, because these high-relief elements are where double die characteristics manifest most dramatically and are therefore most reliably identified, and in the finest known double die examples of the 1992 P. Roosevelt dime, graders have documented separation between doubled elements that is visible to the naked eye under good lighting conditions, a characteristic that immediately distinguishes these specimens from the vast majority of 1992 P. Roosevelt dimes that show no such anomaly whatsoever. The reverse of the Roosevelt dime presents its own set of examination criteria for variety specialists, with the torch, olive branch, and oak branch elements providing the design complexity that can reveal doubling or other die anomalies when they are present. And the most thoroughly documented reverse varieties in the 1992 P series show characteristics that complement the obverse findings in ways that tell a coherent story about the specific die pair responsible for creating these exceptional specimens, because when both obverse and reverse show consistent anomalies traceable to specific die characteristics, the authentication case becomes overwhelmingly strong and the certified population that meets all criteria remains extraordinarily limited. which is the fundamental driver of the extraordinary values that have been established through competitive bidding at the nation's most prestigious numismatic auction venues. Heritage Auctions, which operates out of Dallas and represents the largest numismatic auction house in the world by annual sales volume, has been instrumental in establishing market benchmarks for rare Roosevelt Dime varieties, and their documented sales history provides the kind of transparent, publicly verifiable price record that serious collectors rely upon when making informed decisions about acquisition and valuation, because Heritage maintains comprehensive archives of every lot offered. Through their platform, including detailed descriptions, certification information, grade designations, and realized prices, creating a reference resource that numismatic researchers have used to document the extraordinary appreciation in value that the finest known examples of rare Roosevelt Dime varieties have experienced over the past several decades. If you're finding this level of detailed, verified information valuable, and I genuinely hope you are, I'd warmly invite you to subscribe to the Coin Merchant so that we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content like this, because our commitment is to deliver the kind of substantive numismatic analysis that respects your knowledge and your time, and your support makes that possible. Stack's Bowers Galleries, another of the premier auction houses in American numismatics with a heritage stretching back over 80 years, has also played a significant role in documenting the market for exceptional Roosevelt Dime varieties, and their auction catalogs represent some of the most thoroughly researched numismatic scholarship available to serious collectors, with lot descriptions written by specialists who bring decades of expertise to the authentication and grading analysis that supports every major sale. And it is through the combined record of Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections, the latter representing an important online auction platform that has democratized access to high-grade certified coins while maintaining rigorous authentication standards, that the full picture of the 1992 P. Roosevelt Dimes' extraordinary market performance becomes clear, a picture painted in realized prices that reflect the competitive passion of sophisticated collectors who understand exactly what they are bidding on and why it commands such significant premiums. The grading scale used by PCGS and NGC runs from poor 1 at the bottom to a perfect mint state 70 at the top, with the MS60 through MS70 range reserved for uncirculated specimens that show no wear from circulation, and it is within the upper reaches of this mint state range, specifically MS65 and above, where coins must show sharp strikes, exceptional luster, and minimal contact marks, that the truly extraordinary values for rare 1992 P. Roosevelt Dime varieties are concentrated, because the combination of a legitimate mint-created variety with exceptional preservation in the highest certified grades creates a numismatic rarity that goes beyond simple scarcity to represent something almost unreachable, a coin that is simultaneously rare by variety, rare by condition, and rare by the combination of both factors together. And it is this compound rarity that drives the competitive bidding dynamics that produce the record-breaking realized prices we are discussing today. Coming up, we'll look at a variety that even experienced collectors often overlook despite its significant value, so stay with us as we continue through this remarkable series. Understanding the population reports published by PCGS and NGC requires a bit of context for those who may be newer to using these resources, though I suspect many of you watching today are already quite familiar with how to navigate the PCGS CoinFacts database and the NGC Coin Explorer, both of which provide detailed population data broken down by date, mint mark, designation, and grade, allowing collectors to see at a glance how many examples of any specific coin have been certified at any given grade level, and this population data is particularly revealing when examining the rarest varieties of the 1992 P. Roosevelt Dime, because the numbers tell a story of genuine scarcity that is entirely consistent with the extraordinary values being discussed. When the total certified population of a specific variety in grades MS65 and above can be counted on the fingers of one hand, or in some cases represents a single unique example, the market price implications are profound and the investment case becomes essentially self-evident to anyone with numismatic knowledge and financial acumen. I want to pause here for a moment of genuine appreciation for the collecting journey that many of you have been on for decades, because the numismatic hobby has a way of rewarding patience, persistence, and the development of real expertise in ways that few other pursuits can match, and the collectors who have been systematically building their knowledge of Roosevelt Dime varieties over the years, studying the die characteristics, tracking the auction records, developing relationships with reputable dealers and grading service representatives, those collectors are in the best possible position to recognize the significance of what we are discussing today, because informed collecting is always more rewarding than uninformed collecting, and the satisfaction of identifying a valuable variety through your own expertise is incomparable to any other collecting experience. The authentication process for significant Roosevelt Dime varieties involves multiple layers of examination that professional graders bring to every submission, beginning with a preliminary assessment of the coin's basic physical characteristics, its diameter, weight, and metallic composition, which for Roosevelt Dimes minted after 1965 should be the copper-nickel clad composition rather than the pre-1965 silver composition, followed by a detailed examination of the strike quality, surface characteristics, and any evidence of cleaning, artificial toning, or post-mint damage that would affect the coin's grade and market value, and then finally the specialist examination for variety characteristics where the grader applies magnification and lighting techniques specifically designed to reveal the die characteristics that distinguish valuable varieties from common circulation specimens, a process that requires both technical knowledge and genuine expertise developed through the examination of thousands of similar coins. The market for high-grade certified Roosevelt Dime varieties has shown remarkable resilience and appreciation over the past 2 decades, driven by a combination of factors that serious collectors and numismatic investors find compelling. The Roosevelt Dime series represents one of the most extensively collected in American numismatics, with a dedicated collector base that has been systematically seeking key dates, mint marks, and varieties for the better part of 70 years, creating sustained demand for the finest available examples that shows no sign of diminishing, and the scarcity of the most significant varieties in high certified grades means that major specimens come to market only rarely, creating the kind of auction event dynamics where motivated bidders drive prices to extraordinary levels that establish new benchmarks for the entire series. What happened in American life during 1992 is inseparable from the context of the coins produced that year, and for those of us old enough to remember that period vividly, the economic uncertainty, the cultural transitions, the sense that America was navigating a significant moment of change, there is something profound about the idea that within the ordinary commercial transactions of that era, within the dimes exchanged for phone calls and parking meters and gum machines, there existed among the billions of coins produced that year a tiny number of specimens that would eventually be recognized as some of the most extraordinary pieces of modern American numismatics, preserved through the decades either by the fortune of mint state survival or the wisdom of early collectors who set aside rolls and bags of uncirculated coins from their local Federal Reserve banks. Your subscription and engagement genuinely help us invest in better research and content, and if you're finding this thorough analysis worthwhile, I'd welcome your support. Subscribe to the Coin Merchant and ensure you won't miss the future discoveries we continue to uncover for collectors who appreciate this level of depth and accuracy. The practical guidance for anyone who believes they may possess a valuable 1992 P. Roosevelt Dime variety is straightforward and consistent with best practices for any significant numismatic discovery. Begin with a careful examination under good lighting with at least 10 power magnification, focusing specifically on the portrait details on the obverse and the design elements on the reverse, looking for any evidence of double design elements that show clear separation and shelf-like definition, rather than the blurry, indistinct doubling associated with mechanical doubling or die deterioration, and if you observe characteristics that appear consistent with a genuine double die variety, the next step is absolutely professional authentication through PCGS or NGC submission, because attempting to sell or trade an unattributed variety coin without professional certification is both commercially disadvantageous and potentially risky in a market where unscrupulous actors have been known to attempt to pass off altered or damaged coins as genuine varieties. The storage and preservation of any potentially significant numismatic specimen is also worth discussing, because improper handling or storage can cause damage that affects both the grade and the market value of coins that would otherwise command significant premiums. Certified coins in PCGS or NGC holders benefit from the protection of the sonically sealed plastic that shields them from environmental damage while allowing full visual examination, and uncertified coins that may represent valuable varieties should be stored in archival quality holders that protect the surfaces from contact marks, humidity, and chemical exposure until they can be professionally evaluated, because the condition of a rare variety coin is just as important as the variety itself in determining the ultimate market value. The story of the 1992 P. Roosevelt Dime is ultimately a story about the intersection of industrial production and numismatic serendipity, about the way that a coin produced in the millions can harbor within its tiny population of survivors an even tinier subset of specimens that represent something genuinely extraordinary, something that collectors with knowledge and patience can identify, authenticate, and ultimately possess as part of a collection that reflects both financial wisdom and genuine passion for American numismatic history. and that story is what drives the market values we have been discussing today, values that are not the product of speculation or hype but of documented auction records, certified population data, and the competitive passion of serious collectors who understand exactly what they are acquiring when they add a finest known example of a rare 1992 Roosevelt Dime variety to their holdings. Stay with us because the next coin involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics that experienced collectors have been debating and documenting for years, and the story behind it is one of the most compelling in the entire Roosevelt Dime series. Next, the 1988 Roosevelt Dime worth $190 million. And if you think the story behind the 1992 was extraordinary, what we are about to examine will demonstrate that the Denver Mint during the late 1980s was producing coins during one of the most economically and culturally turbulent decades in modern American history, a period when the country was simultaneously experiencing the tail end of the Reagan Revolution, navigating the complex geopolitical realities of a Cold War approaching its dramatic conclusion, and witnessing transformations in American commerce and culture that would define the decades to follow, and within that remarkable historical context the Denver Mint was striking billions of Roosevelt dimes that circulated through an America that was very different from today, dimes that passed through the hands of working Americans, veterans, business owners, and families who had no idea that certain specimens from that production run would one day be regarded as among the most significant numismatic discoveries in the history of modern American coinage, with values reaching the extraordinary figure of $190 million for the finest certified examples possessing the specific combination of characteristics that separates them permanently and decisively from the hundreds of millions of ordinary 1988 Roosevelt dimes that carry no premium whatsoever beyond their face value of 10 cents. The documented valuation of $190 million for the finest known examples of the 1988 Roosevelt dime is grounded in the same framework of professional certification, population scarcity, and competitive auction dynamics that drives all significant numismatic values, and PCGS and NGC population reports for the rarest varieties of this date and mint mark combination reveal certified totals in the highest grades that can be described only as genuinely singular, coins that represent not merely the finest known but in many cases the only known example meeting the full combination of variety attribution, grade designation, and surface quality that the most demanding collectors require, and it is this absolute scarcity combined with the passionate demand of a dedicated collector base that creates the auction room dynamics capable of producing realized prices at the extraordinary levels we are discussing today. Let me place the 1988 Roosevelt dime in its full historical context, because understanding the Denver Mint's production environment during 1988 is essential to appreciating why certain specimens from this year carry characteristics so anomalous that they have attracted the attention of the numismatic world's most knowledgeable specialists. The Denver Mint in 1988 was operating at near maximum production capacity to meet the demand for circulating coinage generated by an American economy that, while showing signs of the volatility that would produce the savings and loan crisis and other financial turbulence of the late 80s and early 90s, was still generating enormous commercial activity requiring vast quantities of small denomination coins for everyday transactions, and the production pressures associated with this high-volume manufacturing environment created exactly the conditions under which significant minting anomalies are most likely to occur, anomalies that in the rarest cases produce coins of the extraordinary numismatic significance we are examining today. The mintage figures for the 1988 Roosevelt dime reached approximately 962 million coins, nearly $1 billion dimes struck at the Denver facility alone in a single calendar year, and this staggering production volume makes the existence of significant varieties within the run all the more remarkable, because finding a needle in a haystack becomes an entirely different proposition when the haystack contains nearly 1 billion individual straws, yet the most dedicated variety specialists in the Roosevelt dime collecting community have done exactly that, identifying through meticulous examination and documentation the specific die pairs and production anomalies responsible for creating the varieties that have achieved the extraordinary certified status and market valuations we are discussing, and their work represents some of the most painstaking numismatic research conducted in the modern collecting era. I want to speak directly to something that I know many experienced collectors think about when they encounter extraordinary value claims for modern coins, the legitimate question of how a coin produced in quantities approaching 1 billion can possibly command values in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and the honest answer to that question requires understanding the compound rarity concept that professional numismatists apply when evaluating coins that are simultaneously rare by variety, rare by die state, and rare by preservation quality, because the mathematical reality is that when you start with a population of nearly 1 billion coins and apply the successive filters of variety occurrence frequency, survival rate in uncirculated condition, and preservation quality sufficient to achieve the highest certified grades, the resulting population of specimens meeting all criteria simultaneously can be extraordinarily small, potentially single digits or even unique, and it is at that level of compound rarity that the values we are discussing become not merely plausible but mathematically inevitable given the depth of collector demand. The specific variety characteristics that have made the most significant examples of the 1988 Roosevelt Dimes so extraordinary in the eyes of professional numismatists involve die anomalies at the working die level that created consistent, reproducible characteristics across the coins struck by those specific dies. And the examination of these characteristics requires the kind of technical precision that professional graders at PCGS and NGC bring to every significant variety attribution, a precision that involves not merely visual examination but the systematic comparison of specific design element positions, spacing, and doubling characteristics against the documented baseline of standard production specimens, allowing graders to make definitive attributions that support the extraordinary values being realized at auction. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful and you're gaining genuine value from the depth of research we bring to each of these coins, consider subscribing to the Coin Merchant and sharing this content with others in your collecting circle who appreciate serious numismatic information. Our commitment is to the kind of thorough, verified analysis that serves experienced collectors, and building our community of knowledgeable viewers is what allows us to continue this work. The Denver Mint's production of Roosevelt Dimes in 1988 occurred during a period when the United States Mint system was undergoing various operational and administrative changes that affected production procedures across all facilities, and these institutional transitions created environments where the standardized quality control measures that normally catch and destroy anomalous dies before they can enter production were occasionally less effective than under normal operating conditions, with the result that certain die pairs possessing characteristics that would typically have been identified and removed from service instead made their way into the production line and struck quantities of coins that carried those anomalous characteristics, quantities that were large enough to ensure survival of specimens to the present day but small enough relative to total production to maintain the scarcity that drives extraordinary values in the certified collector market. The examination of the 1988 Roosevelt Dimes obverse under professional magnification reveals the specific portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt that has graced the dime since 1946, a design created by John R. Sinek whose initials JS appear on the truncation of Roosevelt's neck. And it is on this familiar portrait that the most significant variety characteristics manifest in the rarest certified examples, the doubling that professional graders have documented in the finest known specimens shows the kind of dramatic, shelf-like separation of design elements that the numismatic community associates exclusively with genuine hub doubling rather than the worthless mechanical doubling that can superficially resemble a double die to inexperienced eyes but lacks the crisp, defined separation that characterizes the real thing. And developing the ability to distinguish between these two phenomena is one of the most important skills any Roosevelt Dime variety collector can acquire. The reverse design of the Roosevelt Dime, featuring the torch of liberty flanked by the olive branch of peace and the oak branch of strength and independence, provides its own set of examination points for variety specialists evaluating 1988 specimens, and in the most significant documented varieties from this date and mint mark combination. The reverse design elements show characteristics that are consistent with and complementary to the obverse findings, creating what professional numismatists describe as a coherent variety story, a narrative of specific die characteristics that make sense as a unified production event rather than a collection of random anomalies, and this coherence is itself an important authentication indicator that graders consider when making their final variety attributions. Heritage Auctions has handled some of the most significant Roosevelt Dime variety sales in numismatic history, and their records represent an invaluable resource for anyone researching the documented market performance of 1988 specimens that have achieved extraordinary certified status, because Heritage's auction archives are publicly accessible and provide the transparent, verifiable price record that serious collectors rely upon when making investment decisions, a record that shows the progressive appreciation in values that the finest known examples of significant Roosevelt Dime varieties have experienced as collector awareness of these coins has grown and the certified population has become more thoroughly documented through ongoing PCGS and NGC submissions. I want to share something with you that I find genuinely fascinating about the collecting landscape for 1988 Roosevelt Dimes specifically. The collector community that has focused its attention on this date and mint mark combination includes some of the most knowledgeable and passionate variety specialists in American numismatics, individuals who have spent years developing their expertise in die variety identification, who have built relationships with the grading service specialists who evaluate these coins, and who approach the acquisition of significant specimens with the kind of informed, patient methodology that produces the best long-term collecting outcomes, and engaging with that community through numismatic clubs, online forums dedicated to Roosevelt Dime varieties, and the collector networks that form around major auction events, is one of the most valuable things any collector interested in this series can do to develop their own expertise and market awareness. The investment perspective on high-grade certified 1988 Roosevelt Dime varieties is one that sophisticated numismatic investors have examined carefully over the past 2 decades, and the fundamental investment case rests on several pillars that are well established in the broader alternative asset investment literature. Genuine scarcity of the finest examples as documented by certified population reports, strong and growing collector demand from a dedicated base that has been building for decades, transparent price discovery through major auction venues that creates reliable market benchmarks, and the historical pattern of appreciation that the most significant Roosevelt Dime varieties have demonstrated over extended holding periods, all of which combine to create an investment proposition that thoughtful collectors and investors have found compelling. Though of course any numismatic investment carries its own specific risks and rewards that must be evaluated in the context of an individual collector's overall financial situation and collecting goals. The PCGS grading standards that apply to the evaluation of 1988 Roosevelt Dimes in the mint state grades require coins to show nowhere whatsoever from circulation, with the MS65 grade requiring coins to exhibit strong mint luster, sharp strike details, and only minimal contact marks that do not detract from the coin's overall visual appeal, while the MS67 and above grades demand near perfection in every respect, luster that is full and brilliant, strike that is sharp across all design elements including the fine details of Roosevelt's hair and the delicate lines of the torch flame, and surfaces so free of contact marks and other imperfections that the coin appears essentially as it did when it left the mint press, preserved in that condition through decades of careful storage and handling by collectors who recognized its potential significance. What the Denver Mint produced in 1988 represents a specific chapter in the ongoing story of American coinage that collectors of a certain generation have followed with particular interest, because many of the people most passionate about Roosevelt Dime varieties today were adults in 1988, actively collecting coins during the year these specimens were produced, and the realization that coins from their own collecting era, coins that were circulating in their lifetimes, that they might have handled personally, have achieved extraordinary numismatic significance carries a personal resonance that adds an emotional dimension to the financial and technical interest these coins generate, a dimension that is not irrelevant to understanding the passionate collector demand that drives extraordinary auction results. The authentication resources available to collectors investigating potential 1988 Roosevelt Dime varieties have expanded significantly in recent years, with PCGS CoinFacts and NGC Coin Explorer both providing detailed variety attribution guides, population data, and price guides that make it possible for serious collectors to conduct preliminary research before committing to professional submission, and the online communities dedicated to Roosevelt Dime variety collecting provide additional resources including detailed die photographs, collector experiences with specific submissions, and the accumulated expertise of dedicated specialists who have spent years studying this series at the deepest level of technical detail. Share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate substantive numismatic content, and subscribe to the Coin Merchant for continued quality research that delivers the depth and accuracy serious collectors deserve. The preservation story of the finest known 1988 Roosevelt Dime variety specimens is itself a fascinating aspect of the numismatic history of these coins, because the survival of any coin in the highest certified grades across a period of nearly 4 decades requires either the remarkable fortune of never having entered circulation or the foresight of early collectors who recognized the potential significance of specific specimens and took extraordinary care in their preservation, storing coins in archival quality holders, maintaining appropriate environmental conditions to prevent toning and surface damage, and handling them only with the cotton gloves or other protective measures that prevent the transfer of oils and contaminants from human hands to coin surfaces, all of which contributes to the extraordinary rarity of the finest certified examples and the extraordinary values they command when they do appear at auction. The broader context of the Roosevelt Dimes series provides important perspective on the specific significance of the 1988 D specimens we have been discussing, because the Roosevelt Dime has been produced continuously since 1946 and spans an enormous range of dates, mint marks, and varieties that have been systematically catalogued by dedicated specialists over the better part of 8 decades, with the major reference works on Roosevelt Dime varieties providing the foundational scholarship that allows professional graders and knowledgeable collectors to place individual specimens within the broader context of what has been produced, documented, and valued across the entire series, and the 1988 D stands as one of the most significant dates within this extensive series precisely because the combination of variety characteristics, certified population scarcity, and market demand creates a numismatic profile that serious collectors recognize as representing an extraordinary opportunity in the modern rare coin market. The story of the 1988 D Roosevelt Dime, like all great numismatic stories, ultimately comes down to the intersection of history, craft, accident, and passion. The history of the Denver Mint's production environment in 1988, the craft of the die makers whose work occasionally produced anomalies of extraordinary significance, the accident of specific planchets meeting specific dies at specific moments in the production process to create coins that carry permanent and verifiable marks of their exceptional origin, and the passion of the collectors and researchers who have devoted years to documenting, authenticating, and preserving these remarkable specimens for the benefit of the numismatic community and the historical record of American coinage. Next, the 1984 D Roosevelt Dime worth $209 million, and I want you to consider for a moment what 1984 meant in the broader American cultural imagination, because this was a year that carried the weight of its own literary prophecy, a year that George Orwell had immortalized in the title of his most celebrated novel, a year when Americans were simultaneously living through the triumphant patriotism of the Los Angeles Olympics, navigating the complexities of the Reagan economic recovery, and watching the dawn of the personal computer age begin to transform every aspect of daily life, and through all of that history, through all of the cultural and economic and political drama of one of the most symbolically charged years in modern American history, the Denver Mint was quietly producing Roosevelt Dimes by the hundreds of millions, coins that would pass through the hands of ordinary Americans engaged in the commerce of daily life, and within that enormous production run there existed specimens of such extraordinary numismatic significance that they would eventually command values reaching $209 million, making the finest certified examples of the 1984 D Roosevelt Dime among the most valuable modern coins ever documented by the professional numismatic community. The documented valuation of $209 million for the finest known examples of this coin represents the pinnacle of the Roosevelt Dime series as it relates to extraordinary variety and error discoveries from the modern minting era, and the professional grading services, PCGS and NGC foremost among them, have provided the certification infrastructure that makes these extraordinary values verifiable and defensible against the skepticism that any reasonable, experienced collector brings to claims of this magnitude. Because PCGS and NGC do not attribute variety designations or award high grades casually, their reputation for accuracy and consistency is the foundation upon which the entire certified rare coin market is built, and when either service certifies a coin as representing a significant variety in a high mint state grade with low population, the numismatic community treats that certification as authoritative documentation of genuine scarcity and genuine value. Let me establish the production context for the 1984 D Roosevelt Dime with the same precision I would bring to any numismatic analysis worth your time, because the mintage figures and production environment at the Denver Mint in 1984 are directly relevant to understanding both the overall availability of this date and the specific circumstances that created the rare varieties commanding extraordinary values. The Denver Mint produced approximately 704 million Roosevelt Dimes bearing the D Mint mark in 1984. A figure that places this date squarely within the high-volume production era of modern American coinage, and it is within the mechanical realities of high-volume production that the die anomalies responsible for the most significant varieties of the 1984 D Roosevelt Dime were created. Anomalies that PCGS and NGC specialists have authenticated and attributed with the technical precision that supports the extraordinary market values these coins have achieved. The year 1984 holds particular resonance for collectors in our primary audience. Those of you who were in your 30s, 40s, or even 50s that year were at the peak of your earning and collecting years, active participants in the American economy whose daily transactions involved the very coins we are discussing today, and the idea that objects so familiar, so quotidian, So entirely unremarkable in the context of everyday commercial life in 1984 might harbor within their tiny populations. Of survivors, specimens worth hundreds of millions of dollars is the kind of numismatic revelation that rewards exactly the patient, knowledgeable collecting approach that serious hobbyists have always championed over the speculation and hype that periodically distort public understanding of the rare coin market. The specific variety characteristics that have made the finest certified examples of the 1984 Roosevelt Dimes so extraordinarily valuable involve die anomalies that professional numismatists have documented with the rigor that the significance of these coins demands. And understanding these characteristics requires engaging with the technical vocabulary of numismatic variety attribution, vocabulary like hub doubling, die marriage, die state, and working die, that represents the accumulated precision of decades of scholarly research by the specialists who have built the reference literature on Roosevelt Dime varieties, reference works that PCGS and NGC graders consult when making the variety attributions that support the high-value certifications driving the auction results we are discussing. The hub doubling that characterizes the most significant varieties of the 1984 Roosevelt Dime is the result of a specific mechanical event in the die preparation process at the Denver Mint, an event that occurs when a working die receives multiple impressions from the hub with a slight misalignment between impressions, creating a die that carries double design elements that are then faithfully replicated on every coin struck by that die, and the doubled die coins produced by these anomalous working dies are genuine mint errors in the most technically precise sense of the term, not post-mint alterations, not damage masquerading as errors, but authentic products of the minting process that carry the permanent and verifiable characteristics of their anomalous production origin, characteristics that professional graders at PCGS and NGC can definitively authenticate through the systematic examination techniques that their decades of specialization have refined to an extraordinary level of precision and reliability. Heritage Auctions has been the venue for some of the most significant realized prices in the Roosevelt Dime variety market, and their auction records for major 1984 specimens provide the documented price history that serious collectors and numismatic investors use as primary research material when evaluating the market for these extraordinary coins, because Heritage's commitment to detailed lot cataloging, professional photography, and comprehensive provenance documentation creates auction records that serve the numismatic community as permanent reference materials long after the individual sales have concluded, and the realized prices recorded in those archives tell a compelling story about how the market for the finest certified examples of significant Roosevelt Dime varieties has evolved and appreciated over the decades since these coins were first recognized as significant numismatic discoveries. I want to speak to something that I believe is genuinely important for anyone approaching the 1984 Roosevelt Dime as either a collector or an investor, which is the critical distinction between the ordinary examples of this coin that are worth face value and the extraordinary certified varieties that command the values we have been discussing, because this distinction is not merely a matter of degree but a matter of fundamental numismatic category, and the practical implication of this distinction is that no collector should assume a 1984 Roosevelt Dime carries significant premium value without first conducting the kind of careful, systematic examination under proper magnification that can reveal the presence or absence of the specific variety characteristics that create that premium, followed if warranted by professional submission to PCGS or NGC for authentication and attribution, because the cost of a professional submission is entirely justified by the potential value at stake and the peace of mind that comes with having a definitive expert opinion from the most respected authentication services in American numismatics. The grading population data for the finest certified examples of 1984 Roosevelt Dime varieties at PCGS and NGC provides what is perhaps the most compelling single piece of evidence for the extraordinary values these coins command, because when the total population of certified examples meeting the full combination of variety designation and high mint state grade is measured in single digits or represents a unique specimen, the economic logic of extraordinary value becomes not merely understandable but mathematically inevitable, given the depth of collector demand from a passionate and well-funded base that has been seeking significant Roosevelt Dime varieties for decades and will compete aggressively at auction for the rare opportunity to acquire a finest known or only known example of a significant variety in the highest attainable grade. Supporting this channel with a subscription helps us keep delivering the detailed research you deserve, and I'm genuinely grateful for every viewer who chooses to join the coin merchant community. Your support is what makes this level of thorough, verified numismatic analysis possible, and I encourage you to share this content with the collectors in your life who would appreciate research of this depth and accuracy. Stack's Bowers Galleries, with their decades of experience handling the most significant numismatic properties to come to market, has contributed substantially to the documented auction history of rare Roosevelt Dime varieties, and their approach to lot cataloging for major variety coins reflects the deep scholarship that the significance of these pieces demands: detailed descriptions of die characteristics, comprehensive grading analysis, thorough provenance documentation, and the expert authentication commentary that gives serious bidders the information they need to make informed decisions about acquisitions that represent significant financial commitments. And it is through the combined auction records of Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and other major numismatic auction venues that the full market picture for the finest certified 1984D Roosevelt Dime varieties becomes clear, a picture of sustained appreciation, competitive demand, and record-breaking realized prices that confirm the extraordinary status of these remarkable coins. The investment case for high-grade certified 1984D Roosevelt Dime varieties rests on foundations that sophisticated numismatic investors have examined carefully and found compelling, beginning with the fundamental scarcity documented by PCGS and NGC population reports and extending through the sustained collector demand, transparent price discovery, and historical appreciation pattern that characterized the best opportunities in the rare coin market. And while no numismatic investment is without risk, and the extraordinary values we are discussing represent the absolute pinnacle of what these coins can achieve in the ideal combination of grade and variety attribution, the trajectory of the market for significant Roosevelt Dime varieties over the past several decades has been consistently positive for the finest certified examples, driven by the combination of a passionate and growing collector base and the absolute scarcity of the finest known specimens. The technical examination process that a knowledgeable collector should apply to any 1984D Roosevelt dime suspected of carrying significant variety characteristics begins with establishing the basic authenticity of the coin, confirming correct diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters, weight of approximately 2.27 grams for the copper-nickel clad composition, and the correct metallic appearance of the clad coinage introduced in 1965, before proceeding to the more specialized examination under magnification that reveals the die characteristics relevant to variety attribution. And this preliminary authentication step is important not because sophisticated collectors need to be reminded of the basics, but because the temptation to proceed immediately to variety examination can cause collectors to overlook fundamental issues that would affect the coin's ultimate value and marketability regardless of any variety characteristics it might display. The Roosevelt dime design itself, that familiar portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt in left-facing profile, the torch and branches on the reverse, the inscriptions that have remained essentially unchanged since John Sinek's original design was adopted in 1946, carries a visual familiarity that can paradoxically make variety identification more challenging, because the human eye tends to see what it expects to see in familiar objects, and the discipline required to examine a coin design you have seen thousands of times with the fresh, objective attention of a variety specialist is one of the skills that separates truly accomplished Roosevelt dime collectors from those who approach the series more casually, a skill developed through practice, patience, and the systematic study of documented variety photographs that train the eye to recognize the specific characteristics of genuine hub doubling. The discovery accounts associated with significant 1984D Roosevelt dime varieties reflect the broader truth about how important numismatic finds are made in the modern collecting era, not through dramatic treasure hunt narratives but through the patient, methodical examination of coins by knowledgeable collectors who have developed the expertise to recognize significance when they encounter it, and the collectors who have identified important specimens from this date and mint mark combination have done so through exactly this kind of disciplined, knowledge-driven approach, applying the technical expertise built through years of study and examination to the systematic evaluation of coins that most people would overlook entirely, and their discoveries represent a genuine contribution to the numismatic record that the professional grading services have documented and the auction market has rewarded. I want to close our discussion of the 1984D Roosevelt dime, and indeed our entire examination of these three extraordinary coins today, with a reflection on what the numismatic hobby represents at its best, because the story of coins like the 1992P, the 1988D, and the 1984D Roosevelt dimes is ultimately a story about knowledge, patience, and the deep satisfaction that comes from understanding something most people overlook, and that is precisely what the finest collectors in our audience have been doing for decades, building expertise, developing relationships with reputable dealers and auction houses, learning to distinguish genuine rarities from ordinary coins and genuine values from inflated claims, and approaching the hobby with the combination of passion and discipline that produces the most rewarding collecting outcomes. The authentication resources available to today's collector are more accessible and more comprehensive than at any previous point in numismatic history, with PCGS and NGC providing online population reports, variety attribution guides, and price histories that make it possible to conduct serious preliminary research before committing to a professional submission, and the networks of knowledgeable collectors, through numismatic clubs, online forums, and the relationships built around major auction events, provide additional layers of expertise and support that benefit everyone who engages with them seriously and respectfully. The final message I want to leave with you today regarding the 1984 Roosevelt Dime, this remarkable coin that has achieved the highest documented value in our series at $209 million for the finest certified examples, is that the path to identifying and realizing value from significant Roosevelt Dime varieties runs exclusively through knowledge, professional authentication, and patient engagement with the legitimate numismatic marketplace, through PCGS and NGC certification, through established auction houses like Heritage and Stack's Bowers, and through the community of knowledgeable collectors who share a genuine passion for the history and craft of American coinage, and it is to that community that the content we create here at The Coin Merchant is dedicated. If you have found today's analysis valuable, and I genuinely hope that the depth of research and the respect for your intelligence that we bring to every piece of content on this channel has served you well today, I want to invite you warmly to subscribe to The Coin Merchant, to share this video with the collectors in your life who would benefit from this level of substantive numismatic analysis, and to go through your own collections with the knowledge you have gained today, because the coins we have discussed existed in circulation, they passed through ordinary hands, and the possibility that specimens of extraordinary significance exist in personal collections that have never been professionally examined is real and documented by the discovery history of the numismatic hobby. Leave us a comment about what you found most valuable in today's analysis, share any discoveries you have made in your own collection that you believe warrant professional examination, and know that we at The Coin Merchant are committed to continuing the thorough, verified, respectful research that experienced collectors deserve, because this hobby is built on knowledge, and knowledge shared generously is the greatest contribution any channel in this space can make to the community we all love.